Hello my dear students. So I'm going to continue the lesson Biosphere. In the first few chapters, we have discussed the different types of organisms that come under the three-domain classification. We started off by discussing the organisms under domain Archaea, then domain Bacteria, and we moved on to domain Eukarya. Under that, we discussed kingdom Protista, kingdom Fungi, and kingdom Plantae. So today I am going to discuss kingdom Animalia. So from the name itself, students, you all know these are the animals that belong to this kingdom. So kingdom with animals who are multicellular. So those are the animals who are multicellular. So we don't have animals that are unicellular under this group. All are multicellular organisms and they are all animals. There are about 1,260,000 species. So that's a very, very large number of species, over 1 million species. So there you can see about 1.2 million and over that. So there are so many different species of organisms or basically animals belonging to this kingdom. And they are unable to produce their own food. So far we have discussed Plantae, even algae, they can all produce their own food. So we call them the autotrophic organisms. But here, they cannot produce their own food. So what do we call them? They are heterotrophic organisms. So under kingdom Animalia, depending on whether they have a vertebral column or not. Now in this picture, I have shown you all the vertebral column, what we call as the backbone or spine, and that is made up of vertebral bones and intervertebral discs. So here you can see from the skull part here, this is the vertebral column. So that defines the presence or absence of vertebral column. Animals that have the vertebral column, they come under vertebrates. And the animals that do not possess a vertebral column, they are known as invertebrates. You are familiar with this classification. So, two main groups based on the presence or absence of vertebral column. So, here we have invertebrates, vertebrates, and vertebrates. So from the picture you all know we are vertebrates because we have the backbone. That is the introduction to kingdom Animalia. With that students, I will move on to the next slide. So here we will look at the classification. Under invertebrates and vertebrates there are different phyla. So under invertebrates there are 5 groups. The first one is Cnidaria or Coelenterata. Cnidaria or Coelenterata. Then we have phylum Annelida. Then we have phylum Mollusca. And then we have phylum Arthropoda. And finally, we have Echinodermata. So, Cnidaria or Coelenterata, Annelida, Mollusca, Arthropoda, and Echinodermata. Those are the groups or animals that come under invertebrates. Animals without a backbone or a vertebral column. Then if we look at vertebrates, again, there are different classes, groups coming under vertebrates. You are familiar with them as well. We have pisces. Then we have amphibia. Then we have reptilia. Aves. And mammalia. So those are the groups of animals that come under vertebrates. We will discuss them one by one. So I will start with the invertebrates. So we have the first group, invertebrates. Organisms without a vertebral column is known as invertebrates. So I explained what a vertebral column is. So all these organisms, they don't have a vertebral column. Invertebrates again can be divided into different phyla. So you have to remember these, students. You can remember the hierarchical order based on nomenclature: domain, kingdom, phylum. So this is the third level. We started off with the domain Eukarya, then kingdom Animalia, and we have the different phyla. Phyla according to their features. So there are 5 main phyla under this invertebrate group. We have already discussed the names. I will write it again. The first phyla is Cnidaria, or what we call as Coelenterata. Then we have phylum Annelida, phylum Mollusca, or what we call as mollusca. Then we have Arthropoda. And finally we have Echinodermata. So Cnidaria or Coelenterata, Annelida, Mollusca, Arthropoda and Echinodermata. We will discuss these phyla one by one. So first one, that is phylum Cnidaria or Coelenterata. These are diploblastic organisms. What are diploblastic organisms? The body is made up of 2 germinal layers. Diplo means 2. 2 blastic means 2 layers. So that is why we call them as diploblastic organisms. Now if you take the body shape of a Cnidarian, it will have 2 germinal layers. This is one layer and this is another layer. Why do they call it as germinal layers? Initially when the organism develops, these are the layers that are found in the developmental stages. So those are what we call as the germinal layers. So 2 germinal layers. So because of that, these are known as diploblastic organisms. So 2 germinal layers of the body. Here you can see diploblastic because body is made of 2 germinal layers. Under that, if we look at examples, Hydra. You all are familiar with the structure of Hydra. It's like a plant. Not a plant, looks like one. Normally, it is fixed to the substrate. You all can remember, students. You have learned this in smaller grades also. A long cylindrical structure like that. Then with tentacles and all those. So that is Hydra. Hydra is one of the organisms that belong to Cnidaria. Then you can see here sea anemone. Sea anemone is also fixed to the surface. You can see a similarity between them. You can see this structure. This part is the mouth of the Hydra. Then you can see the tentacles. So here also you can see this is like a cylindrical structure. It's fixed to the substrate. So it's a sedentary organism. You all know the meaning of sedentary. They cannot move. And you can see the tentacles and the mouth is in the middle. And you can see if you take the cross section, we look at the shape. It's like a spherical shape, a circle-like shape. So here also you can see the circular shape. Here also you can see the circular shape. Then if we take the jellyfish, these are forms that can move around. You know they have 2 body forms. These 2 that are sedentary or attached to the substrate, we call them the polyps. And that is the medusa form. Medusa can move. So here again you can see if you take this shape, that is like a circle shape. And here also you can look at the full organism. So they do have similarities and they have differences as well. So these are the 3 organisms. So if I write the examples, Hydra, then we have sea anemone, and we have jellyfish. Hydra, sea anemone, and jellyfish. Now that you all know the examples of cnidarians or phylum Cnidaria or Coelenterata, there is a reason why we call them Coelenterata. That is because inside the germinal layers, now I showed you all the picture, students. Inside these germinal layers, there is a body cavity that is called the coelenteron. That is why we call them as Coelenterata. So before we discuss all these properties, what we will do is we will look at a video where you can observe these organisms in their natural habitat. Then you will get a better idea about their features. Okay, students. So now that you watched the video, you all have an idea about the features of all these organisms. Those are the group Cnidaria or Coelenterata, and you all know it is the phylum. So now we will discuss the features of these organisms. Features of Cnidarians or Coelenterates. If you look at the examples, there is Hydra, sea anemone, and jellyfish. So then if you look at the habitat, all are aquatic. That's very important. They are all aquatic and mostly they are in the marine environment, that is the sea environment where the water is more salty, and some are freshwater dwellers. Freshwater dwellers means they live in fresh water. So mostly marine, some are freshwater dwellers, but they are all aquatic organisms. Then if you take the body layers, these are multicellular body. You know that all the animals are multicellular organisms built up of two germinal layers. That is why we call them diploblastic. The term diploblastic, it was there in the previous slide also. So there are two body layers, those are the germinal layers. Because of that, we call them as diploblastic animals. Then if we look at the body cavity, a cavity present within the body, it is called the coelenteron. I said that's why we call them as coelenterates. So coelenteron. A cavity present within the body called coelenteron, and it acts as the digestive tract. So when I drew the structure of the germinal layers, the two layers, and inside there is the cavity, and that is what we call as coelenteron. Then if we look at the body forms, there are two forms and their locomotion, based on their locomotion. So what are the two forms? One is called the polyp. These are attached to the surface or what we call as sedentary forms. And what are the examples? Hydra and sea anemone. Then we have the next type, that is called the medusa. They can move, or we can call them free-floating organisms. Example, it is the jellyfish. And you saw how the jellyfish moved in water as well. So two body forms based on their locomotion. Polyp, it's attached to the surface, so we call it the sedentary form. Hydra and sea anemone are examples of polyp. We call them the polyps, Hydra polyp and sea anemone polyp. And we have the medusa form, that's the free floating form. So jellyfish is an example of medusa. Then if we look at the symmetry. Now you all can remember, students, I told you all. Now if you look at the shape of the body, you were able to see it was a shape like that. A circle shape. If you cut across the body of a hydra or sea anemone, jellyfish, any part of the body, if you cut across, you will get a circular shape like that. So here you can see, you can cut across like that, you can cut across like this through many axes. So what do we call that symmetry? It is known as the radial symmetry. So you can see there, students. Along many axes of symmetry, the body can be divided into two equal parts. So that means these organisms have radial symmetry. They show radial symmetry. Then if you look at the nutrition, all are predators. All are predators. It is understood that all of them are heterotrophic because they cannot produce their own food, that you know, those are the animals. And under that, these are all predators. So they feed on the small animals that float in water. So what they do is they attack small organisms to paralyze them using nematocyst or nidocyst. That is why we call them Cnidaria, because they have this nidocyst. It is a small sac-like structure which is used to paralyze the prey. They sting the prey with that and then the prey becomes paralyzed. After that, they consume the prey using their mouth. So inside the body, what is there? The coelenteron, that is the digestive tract. So the paralyzed organism goes through the mouth into the coelenteron where it is digested. So they are all predators and they attack small organisms to paralyze them using nematocyst or nidocyst. Then if you look at the reproduction, they can show asexual reproduction, that is done by budding. Also, they show sexual reproduction. You all are familiar with this process, budding. This is how it happens. Now, if this is a polyp, it has the tentacles like this, like hydra. From the polyp, there will be a small bud formed. This is a bud, a part of the body of the organism that can detach from this body and that can fall on the substrate, the surface, and it will grow into a new organism. So that is the process of budding. So they reproduce by budding. So these are the features, students. The Cnidarians or coelentrates, hydra, sea anemone, jellyfish, they are all aquatic, mostly marine, and some are freshwater dwellers. The body layers are made up of multicellular body layers and it has two germinal layers. That's why we call them as diploblastic animals. And the body cavity is called the coelenteron and that acts as the digestive tract. Then there are two forms, polyps that are attached to the surface. Hydra and sea anemone are polyps and medusa is the free floating form, that is example is jellyfish. Then symmetry, if you look at the body of these organisms, they show radial symmetry. And nutrition, they are all predators and they use nematocyst or nidocyst in order to paralyze the prey before consuming it. And reproduction, asexual reproduction is by budding and also they show sexual reproduction. So those are the features of Cnidarians or coelenterate. I am sure you all can remember those now. So with that, students, I will move on to the next slide. So here we have the body forms of cnidarians. Here you can see a polyp form and a medusa form. So here this is the part that attaches to the surface of the substrate, or the, let's say, the soil or the flow of the marine environment, and this is the medusa form. In both you all can see this is like a cylindrical structure. This is like an umbrella, upside down umbrella jellyfish, you all know. But still, if you take the look at the shape, they are circle-like in shape. So that means they have the radial symmetry, that you can understand. Then if you look at this part, inside is the coelenteron. This is the coelenteron. And here you can see both the body forms. Here also you can see the two germinal layers. Two germinal layers. So here also you can identify this one layer and this one layer. Those are the two germinal layers. Then you can see the tentacles as well. Here also you can see these are the tentacles, and here also you can see the tentacles. Tentacles are those structures which move and they direct the prey towards the mouth. The mouth will be here, and inside is the coelenteron, the digestive tract. So the tentacles actually direct the water with the floating organisms. So they come in, and the nidocyst or nematocyst is there. They paralyze the prey, and then that is pushed into the through the mouth into the coelenteron, where it will undergo digestion. Whereas this is the free floating form, medusa form. Same thing, they have the mouth at the bottom. They also can catch the prey in the same manner. And also they can float around. They can move around. So this is the body structure of cnidarians or coelenterate, polyp and medusa forms. You have to remember that. You should be able to identify the parts, and also you should be able to identify the organisms. Hydra and sea anemone belong to this. Jellyfish belongs to the medusa form. With that, students, I will move on to the next slide. So here we have an extra knowledge. You all can identify this. What is that? A coral reef. Those are polyps. Polyp coral colonies. Now here you can see this is a coral colony. You can see these hole-like, pole-like structures. Inside that you have the polyps living as a colony. When we say colony, many organisms lives together and they secrete this coral structure. Coral is also made up of calcium carbonate, you all know that, and it is very, very useful to our environment. If we read this, coral reefs, so here you can see coral reefs produced by a coral polyp belong to phylum Cnidaria. So here you can read the term phylum Cnidaria, and those are coral polyps. So coral reef is the structure you have seen in the beach sides. In our country, around the country, we have very beautiful and very useful coral reefs. So coral reefs produced by a coral polyp belong to phylum Cnidaria. They play a major role for the survival of marine organisms. For the survival of marine organisms. One thing, they are important for the ecosystem. It is the marine ecosystem. It is important there. Then they act as a habitat for some of the organisms. Although the sea, the marine environment is the habitat, some of them live under these coral polyps. And also you all know, coral polyps are important in preventing soil erosion by sea. Now because it slows down the waves. So that is also very, very useful. But when there are human activities like the waste materials being accumulated in water, marine environment, household waste, water or industrial effluents, sometimes oil leakage from ships, all these can affect and destruct the polyp coral colonies. So that can become very, very harmful to the environment. To that extent, these coral polyps are very, very important to us. So now again, we will watch a video where you can have a look at some of the coral polyps and how beautiful they are for the environment. Not only the beauty, how important they are also. That is what you need to remember. Okay, students. So you were able to look at the nice coral polyps. You would have enjoyed watching it. And also you have to remember they are very, very useful to us and they are very important for the survival of marine organisms. So basically they are very important parts of the ecosystem. So we need to make sure that we preserve them and not destroy them. So with that understanding, students, I will move on to the next slide. That is the second phyla under invertebrates. That is Annelida, phylum Annelida or Annelida. So here, these are the first organisms to evolve a body cavity called coelom. In the previous one, you can remember the body cavity was called the coelenteron. Here the body cavity is called coelom. So that is very important. Coelom belongs to this phyla. Under that, we call them the segmented worms. What is the reason? They have a vermiform body. So you know what vermiform is, worms. Some of y'all like to look at worms. Some of y'all I know feel very uncomfortable looking at worms. But these all have the vermiform body. Long worm-like body, and this body is divided into segments. Not only externally, internally also. So the whole body is made up of segments. That is why we call them as segmented worms. And all the organs are present inside each segment. That's why they are known as segmented worms. So if we look at examples, you can see here earthworm. Can you see these lines? Those are the segments of the earthworm. One example. Earthworm. Then what is this? A leech. If you look at the leech closely also, you can identify the segments and the vermiform body. Worm-like body. So we have leech. And then we have nereis. Nereis is also an annelid worm. You can see the structure. These are all the segments. But all these three worms, they are different in their morphological features so that you can identify them separately. But they have the basic features. They do have a coelom and the body is segmented. So they are known as segmented worms. This is an important term that you need to remember. So here you can see, students, nereis is a scientific name. These two are common names, earthworm, leech. So we can write them individually, but nereis is a scientific name. So if we write it, we need to underline it. If it is printed, you can see it is italicized. But when we write, we need to underline it. So the examples are earthworm, leech and nereis. So that now you all know the organisms that belong to phylum Annelida, the segmented worms. Now we will watch a video where you all can observe these organisms. Okay, students. So now that you watched the video, you all know how these organisms are. You all also know how these organisms move. Earthworm, of course, moves through the soil. It can go into the soil. It actually loosens the soil. It helps to increase the quality of the soil. By increasing the pores, there is more soil air, and also it provides nutrients by consuming the organic substances, and whatever comes out is the nutrients that are added to the soil. Not only that, you would have seen the leech, how the leech moves. You would have seen the leech having suckers, and they use their suckers for their locomotion. I have explained this in the grade 8 lesson also. You can remember that. So leech uses suckers to move as well as to suck blood from organisms. Then we have Nereis, that is the next organism or segmented worm that belongs to phylum Annelida. These are all invertebrates, so they don't have a vertebral column. With that understanding, students, we will move on to the next slide where we discuss the features of annelid worms or segmented worms that belong to Annelida. So, features of Annelida, the segmented worms. If we look at the examples first, you know earthworm, leech and Nereis. You all have to remember the examples, students. Then if we look at the habitat, from the name earthworm, you all know obviously it lives in soil. It lives on earth, that is soil. So there you can see it is the damp soil, that is the first environment. Then you can see the second environment, marine environment, and the third one, freshwater habitats. So it can live in the terrestrial environment as well as the aquatic environment. So under terrestrial, it is the damp soil, and under aquatic environments, marine and freshwater. So marine water, freshwater, two types of water, it can live in both. That is the earthworms. Then if we look at the cellular organization, they have a multicellular body. When we started off the lesson, this chapter, we saw all the animals belonging to kingdom Animalia. They are multicellular organisms. So the annelid worms, they are also multicellular. So they possess a multicellular body. If we take the body layers, they are made up of three germinal layers. So what do we call them? Triploblastic. They are triploblastic organisms. Triploblastic or triploblastic body. Tri means three, blastic is the three layers. So the body is made up of three germinal layers. Triploblastic body. Then if we take the body shape, that is slender worm-like body. What do we call that? Vermiform body. Vermiform body structure. Vermiform body. So that is slender worm-like body structure. Vermiform body structure. Then we have the body segmentation. I told you all inside and outside. So the body is segmented. That is why we call them as segmented worms, and the segmentation is external as well as internal. You can see it outside as well as inside also. All the organs are segmented. So body is divided into segments internally and externally. That is very important. It is divided into segments internally and externally. That is why we call them as segmented worms. Segmented worms. So I am sure you all can remember those, students. Then if we look at the symmetry. Now since it's a vermiform body structure, worm-like body structure, can you all cut the worm across through any axis? No. Why? You can remember, you saw the shape of the Nereis. That is a flat worm. So you cannot have many axes of symmetry. So therefore, they show bilateral symmetry. There is only one axis that can be used to cut the worm into half, the body of the worm into half. So that means they have bilateral symmetry. Then if we consider the body cavity, annelids we said are the first type of organisms or animals in which the body cavity named coelom was evolved. So fluid-filled cavity between body wall and the digestive tract, that is known as the coelom. So here if we take the body of an annelid worm, so it has to be a worm-like body, a vermiform body. So you can cut across like this. So that is bilateral symmetry. And there is the digestive tract. Inside is the digestive tract. If this is the digestive tract, there is a fluid-filled cavity here. That is what we call as coelom. So that is a special cavity or a body cavity called coelom. That is a special feature of these annelid worms. You all have to remember that. So here you can see fluid-filled cavity between the body wall, as I showed you all students. So here you can see students, this is the body wall and this is the digestive tract. In between the two you get the coelom. So a fluid-filled cavity between body wall and the digestive tract, that is called coelom, and it provides an independent movement for the gut wall. So this digestive tract is what we call as the gut. The gut has the wall. For the digestion process to take place, the gut wall has to move. But the earthworm or the annelid worms, they will also move with their body, because you all know they move along the soil, or they have leeches have a different way of locomotion, but still they use their body for locomotion. So the body will move in a certain way, but the gut has to move independent of the body. For that, the coelom provides the movement. It provides an independent movement for the gut wall irrespective of the body movements. That's very important. You have to remember that, student. Then if we look at the reproduction, they can reproduce asexually or they can undergo sexual reproduction. So both methods are possible. Then we will look at all the properties once again. Examples of annelids: earthworm, leech and nereis. They can live in any environment, dam soil, marine, fresh water. The body is multicellular and also they are made up of 3 germinal layers, so triploblastic organisms. And the body shape is slender worm-like body. We call it vermiform body. And body segmentation, there is internal and external segmentation. Therefore, we call them as segmented worms. There is bilateral symmetry, only one axis of symmetry that divides the body into 2 equal halves. And the body cavity is known as coelom, and it provides independent movement for the gut wall irrespective of the movement of the body of the worm. And the reproduction can be either sexual or asexual reproduction. So now students, you all have a very good understanding of the features of the annelid worms. In the next slide, we will look at the parts of the annelid worm. So here you can see students, it is an external view of an annelid worm, and from the view you know this is an earthworm. So this is an earthworm. And if you look at the parts, now this part that looks like a swelling there, that is known as the clitellum. This is involved in the reproductive process. This is involved in sexual reproduction. So that part is known as the clitellum. Then here you can see students, if you look at the body of the earthworm, you can see all these segments. Externally also you can see them. So those are the segments. Then if you look closely, near the body of the external surface of the earthworm, you can see small bristle-like structures. Those are known as, these parts, they are known as setae. You all know the meaning of bristle, small spine-like, small thin structures. So these actually help the earthworm to move without slipping. So those are the parts of the earthworm, body of the earthworm, that you all have to remember. You need to identify the segments. The whole body is segmented. That's why we call them as segmented worms. Then there is the clitellum that is involved in reproduction. And there is the setae, small bristle-like structures that help the worm to move without slipping. So those are the parts of an external view of an annelid worm. With that understanding, students, I will move on to the next slide. This is the next phylum under invertebrates. Mollusca, phylum Mollusca. Here we call those organisms as molluscs. They are soft-bodied, triploblastic organisms belong to this phylum. Soft body. You can remember the snail. Snails are normally seen in your home gardens also. When they move, you can really look at them and you know they have very soft body and even a very muscular foot. So soft-bodied animals and also triploblastic. What is the meaning of triploblastic? The body is made up of 3 germinal layers. So soft-bodied, triploblastic organisms belong to this phylum. You can see some of those animals here. There is the snail. So as examples, we can take the snail. Then there is the cuttlefish. Cuttlefish. Then we have the octopus. Now we will try to understand their features. Now if you look at the snail, you can see the spiral-like shell. It is a calcium carbonate shell. You can see the soft body here, and this part is the muscular foot, and this area is the head of the snail with the antenna, and you will see the compound eyes also. So that's the snail. You would have seen the snail moving on soil as well, leaving the tracks because the body is moist. It has mucus secretion, so you can see the trail as well. So this is a snail. This does not have a symmetry. Because of this particular shell, you cannot divide it into 2 equal halves. The body cannot be divided into equal halves. No symmetry. But if we take the cuttlefish and octopus, we can divide their body into 2 equal halves through a certain axis. So that means they are both bilaterally symmetric. So when we consider the mollusks or the organisms, animals belonging to phylum Mollusca, they show bilateral symmetry. Then if we look at the cuttlefish, this is the shape of the cuttlefish. It lives in the sea, so you know marine environment. Same way, if you take the octopus, you can see the 8 structures. That's why the name octopus. 8 hands-like or leg-like structures, but still the body can be divided into 2 halves only through 1 axis of symmetry. So that is also bilateral symmetry. So both of these live in water, marine environment usually. Are these the only examples? Snail, cuttlefish, octopus? No. There is the bivalve. Bivalves are also mollusks. Bivalves. Then there is chiton. Snail, cuttlefish, octopus, bivalves, chitons, all these are different types of molluscan animals or mollusks. Now that you have an idea about these different types of mollusks, students, we will watch a video to understand their features in more detail, and you can see them in their natural habitat as well. Okay, students. So now that you have seen these organisms, you all have a better understanding about their features. So let's move to the next slide and discuss their features. Features of mollusk or features of mollusca. If we look at the examples, snail, bivalve, you know what bivalves are, what you collect as shells. Bivalves have the two shells connected together, so it actually opens up, the organism lives inside, that's why we call it bivalves. Then chiton, slug, squid and octopus. Those are the different types of animals belonging to phylum Mollusca. Then if we look at the habitats, again you can see they can live in terrestrial habitat. Obviously, snail and slug, they usually live in the terrestrial habitat, whereas they can live in freshwater and marine habitats. So all the other organisms are aquatic organisms. Bivalve, chitons, squid and octopus, both freshwater and marine environment. If we take the cellular organization, obvious they are multicellular. Body is made up of many cells and that also is made up of 3 germinal layers. Then if we take the body layers, I said triploblastic. So that means there are 3 germinal layers. Germinal layers. Then the body type. They have a very soft body. So because of that, we call them as soft-bodied animals. The mollusks are called as soft-bodied animals. And the soft body is also known as the visceral mass. So it is known as the visceral mass. If we look at the body division, the body is divided into 3 parts. So it is divided into the head, the visceral mass, and muscular foot. Not feet, foot. It only has 1 foot. So there is a head. When I showed you all the snail, I showed you all the head with the antenna and it has an eye. Then the visceral mass, the soft body, that is the soft body, and muscular foot, 1 muscular foot. It is not divided into segments. So the body is not divided into segments, but it is divided as head, visceral mass and muscular foot. Then there is mucus. Body is moistened by mucus. That is also something important. As I told you, when the snail moves along the soil, you can see the track. Because of the moist body, it leaves a track. So that is because the body is moistened by mucus. Mucus is a substance that helps to keep the body moist. Then the skeleton. There can be an internal and external shells. Both are made up of calcium carbonate. CaCO3 is calcium carbonate. Calcium carbonate. In the snail, students, you can remember, you can see the shell outside. So that is a calcium carbonate shell, an external shell. Whereas in the squid, are you all able to see an external skeleton? No. In that, there is an internal skeleton. There is an internal skeleton that is also made up of calcium carbonate that is inside the body. So these mollusks or animals belonging to phylum Mollusca, they can have an internal skeleton or an external shell. Then if we look at the symmetry, I explained this to you all. The snail doesn't have a symmetry, but the other organisms, they are bilaterally symmetrical. So that means there is only 1 axis through which the body can be divided into 2 equal halves. Bilaterally symmetrical. And reproduction, it is by sexual reproduction, but most of them are unisexual. So they only produce 1 type of gamete, but they reproduce by sexual reproduction. You all have to remember that, students. So students, from this, you all can understand the features of mollusks. So with that, I will move on to the next slide. Here you can see the longitudinal section of a mollusk. So as you can see, this is a snail. So you can see the calcium carbonate shell there. Inside that there is the soft body. So this part is the soft body, or what we call as visceral mass. Visceral mass. Then here you can see this is the muscular foot. Muscular foot of the snail, and this part is the head. So we discussed that the body is divided into 3 parts. There is no segmentation, but the body is divided into 3 parts: head, visceral mass and muscular foot. And here you can see the antenna, and they have the compound eyes also. All those can be seen there. So this is the longitudinal section of a mollusk. So when we write mollusk, that refers to the organism. If it is the phylum, we have to call it as mollusca. So I am sure students, with this you have a good understanding about the animals belonging to mollusca or phylum mollusca. So then I will move on to the next slide. Arthropoda. So this is the next phylum under invertebrates. So far we have discussed phylum Cnidaria or Coelenterata, then phylum Annelida, and then phylum Mollusca. Now we come to this phylum Arthropoda, where the organisms are known as arthropods. This is a phylum that actually includes a very large number of animals. So that is something like a special feature that you need to remember regarding this phylum. The thing is, arthropods can be divided into many different groups. So under that, there is the class Insecta that has a very large number of animals or insects in it. So let's look at Arthropoda. This is the phylum with the highest number of species. As I said, it can be considered as a special feature. Highest number of species in the animal kingdom. So out of all the groups under animal kingdoms, this is the phylum that has the highest number of species. 75% of the animal species belong to this phylum. So here you can see 75% out of all the animals, 75% of the animal species belong to this phylum. The class Insecta of this phylum Arthropoda possesses the highest number of organisms. So even in your environment, you see a lot of insects. Can you name them? I am sure you can. You can think of butterfly, mosquito, beetles, bees, wasp, dragonfly, fly, so many different insects. Even ladybugs, all those are different types of insects. So the class Insecta includes the highest number of organisms. So those two are important features or important points that you need to remember regarding arthropods. There are about 950,000 species belong to this phylum. So under arthropods, if you look at the number of species, there are about 950,000 species. Why do we call them arthropods? You know the meaning. Arthro means jointed. Pods means legs. So animals with jointed limbs belong to this group. So the organisms with jointed limbs belong to this group. So under that, there are so many examples. A very few examples are shown to you. You can see here butterfly, an insect. Then there is the spider. Now you can see between the butterfly and spider, there are similarities, but there is a lot of difference also. That is why this phylum includes so many different species. Then look at this organism, the scorpion. Then we have the centipede. Those are 4 organisms. In addition to that, you can even think of the millipede. Then there is the mosquito. Then there is wasp. Then we can even write bees. Then there is beetle. We can keep on writing. So many different species. So butterfly, spider, scorpion, centipede, millipede, mosquito, wasp, bees, beetle, and dragonfly, like that. You can keep on houseflies. You can keep on adding all the organisms to arthropods. Even the arthropods that live in sea. You can think of the crab. Then there is the prawns. They are also arthropods. So many different species. You know those organisms, you have seen those animals, you can relate their similarities as well as you can understand the difference. So that is the phylum Arthropod, or the organisms, those are known as arthropods because they have jointed limbs. So if you look at the phylum, this is the phylum with the highest number of species in the animal kingdom. So about 75% of the species, animal species, belong to this kingdom. You have to remember that. And especially the class Insecta, they possess or they include the highest number of organisms. So there are about 950,000 species that belong to this particular phylum. That is the invertebrate phylum, that is Arthropoda. So the meaning Arthropoda comes from the name jointed limbs. Arthro means jointed, limbs is poda. So Arthropoda means jointed limbs. And as examples, we have seen millipede. Millipede, it should be M-I-L-L-I-P-E-D-E, millipede. Then there is mosquito, wasp. Then we saw butterfly, spider, scorpion, centipede. And there is bees, beetle, crab, prawns that live in water, and also there is barnacle. I will include that as well. Barnacles. So all these are different types of organisms belonging to Arthropoda. In addition to that, you can think of many other insects as well that you see in your environment. So now that you have an understanding about what arthropods are, we will move on to the next slide where we discuss the features. Features of arthropods. So first we have the examples, insects. So that is a class under phylum Arthropoda. Bee, butterfly, even cricket. I did not mention that. Cricket is also an insect. Then there is mosquito, then spider, scorpion, millipede, centipede, prawn, crab, barnacle. All these are different examples for arthropod organisms. Barnacles, all these are examples. So if you consider these organisms, I am sure you all know insects live in the terrestrial environment. We find them around us in our environment. Then there is millipede, spider, scorpion, all those in our environment. So obviously they inhabit the terrestrial habitats. But if we take the organisms like prawn, crab, barnacles, obviously they live in the aquatic environment. So if we look at the habitats, they live in the marine environment, they live in fresh water, and they live in the terrestrial habitats. So all these are different habitats of arthropods because there are so many species. They are so much different from each other. So they can inhabit basically any part. So marine, freshwater and terrestrial habitats. Then if we look at the limbs, the name arthropod comes from the limbs of these organisms. Jointed limbs. So jointed limbs is a special feature of arthropods. Arthropods means arthro, jointed, and pods means legs. So jointed limbs or jointed legs, animals with jointed legs or animals with jointed limbs. Those are the arthropods. Then if we take the body layers, 3 layers. That also you can understand, students. When we looked at Cnidaria, it was 2 germinal layers, diploblastic. But starting from Annelida, mollusca, and now Arthropoda, all of them, the body is made up of 3 germinal layers. So that means it is triploblastic. So here we can say 3 germinal layers. So here you can understand the evolutionary relationship as well as the evolution process itself, how it's becoming more and more complex, how they are evolving into different types of organisms. Then if we take the body cavity, this also has a body cavity. You can remember initially it was the coelenteron in Cnidaria or coelenterata. Then from Annelida, it is the coelom. Coelom was present in Annelida, then in mollusca, and here also coelom is present. So coelomic body. A body cavity is present in the body of arthropods. If we look at the body segmentation, their body is segmented. Like the annelid worms, their body is segmented, but here there is a special character. A few of the segments combine and form a segment called tagma. And in some of the arthropods, there can be 3 tagma. In some arthropods, there are 2 tagma. So if we look at the body segmentation, they are segmented. Several segments collectively form functional segments. You have to remember that. Functional segments called tagma. That is important. So when several segments combine and form a functional segment, that is known as a tagma. Normally, there is the head, thorax, and abdomen. You can understand this when I explain y'all an arthropod with a picture, with a diagram. When I explain the body of an arthropod, a cockroach, I will show you all the head, thorax, and the abdomen. So those are the 3 tagma present in a cockroach. Then there is another special feature, wings, especially the insecta, animals belonging to class insecta. They all possess wings. Some possess special wings. Why do we say special wings? When we discuss the artificial classification also, we discuss this. Now, birds have wings, insects have wings. According to the artificial classification, we put them together. But that was not correct. Why? Because here the wings are totally different. The wings of insects are parts of their external skeleton. So, wings are part of the external, or you can say exoskeleton. There is another thing I have told you all. When we were discussing fungus, what is the polysaccharide present in the cell wall of fungus? Yes, it is chitin. Cell wall made up of chitin or chitinous cell wall. Then I told you all the exoskeleton of arthropod is also made up of chitin. So if we look at the skeleton, there is a chitinous cuticle, very important, on the body. Cuticle means outer cover, like the cuticle of the plant leaves. Here, this is the cuticle outer cover or the exoskeleton of the arthropod body. And that is a chitinous cuticle on the body. And that is the exoskeleton. So this is how, students, you all can relate the features of one group of organisms to another group of organisms. Then if we look at the symmetry, bilateral symmetry. Why? Because if you look at the body shape, now when we say tagma, there will be the head region, then there will be the body, and there will be this is the head, thorax, and the abdomen. And in addition to this, there can be the wings of different shapes. You can cut this body across only one axis of symmetry. So that means they have bilateral symmetry. You can understand that. Because the segments are joined, they form the tagma, and there are 3 tagma, or they can be 2 tagma, and based on the shape, there is only bilateral symmetry. So here you can understand that, students. Symmetry is bilateral symmetry. Then if we look at the reproduction, these organisms are dimorphic. Dimorphic means you can identify the male and female organisms separately. So you have arthropods, the male arthropods and the female arthropods, and they can be externally identified. So they show sexual dimorphism. In that case, they reproduce sexually. So reproduction. There are separate female and male organisms. So we call them as sexually dimorphic. Dimorphic or sexual dimorphism. The feature where there you find the separate female and male organisms that can be identified separately as well. So there is sexual reproduction. These are the features, students. If I go back and go through the features again, examples: insects, bee, butterfly, cricket, mosquito, spider, scorpion, millipede, centipede, prawn, crab, barnacle. Then habitat, marine, freshwater and terrestrial. Limbs, jointed limbs, arthropoda, jointed legs. Body layers, 3 germinal layers, so triploblastic. Body cavity, coelom. Body segmentation, they are segmented and segments combine and form tagma, head, thorax and abdomen. Then there is the special type of wings, those are part of the exoskeleton, and the exoskeleton is chitinous cuticle. We call it the exoskeleton because it's outside the body, and the body is bilaterally symmetrical and they show sexual dimorphism. So you can identify the female and male organisms separately. So they reproduce sexually. These are the features you all need to understand, students. With that, I will move on to the next slide where, as I told you, I will show you the parts of an insect. So here, students, you can see the external appearance of an insect. By just looking at the insect, you can identify it as the cockroach. So here you can see the 3 parts of the body. The segments combine together to form a functional segment. What are they called? The tagma. Here you can see the tagma, the head. Then here you can see, students, the thorax. And here you can see the abdomen. And from the thorax region, you can see these jointed limbs. You can see the joints as well. So jointed. Here you can see 3 joints. So these are the jointed limbs. Jointed limb. What else can you see? Can you see the wings there? So those are the wings. I said they have special wings and they are part of the exoskeleton. So the body is actually covered with chitinous cuticle or chitinous exoskeleton. And here you can see the eye. Then the antenna are there. So those are the parts of the insect. So here you can see the external appearance of an insect. And these are the parts that you need to remember. So when you look at an insect, when you look at a cockroach or a dragonfly, cricket, anything, you will be able to identify their wings. Then you can see the 3 parts, the head, thorax and the abdominal regions. Then you can see the jointed limbs. You can even see their eyes. Even in the mosquitoes, you can see their jointed limbs. Although they are very tiny, still you can see it. Even ants come under Arthropoda. So they also have all these features. So with that, students, I am sure you all have a very good idea about what arthropods are or phylum Arthropoda are. With that, students, I will move on to the next slide. So here there is an assignment. Prepare an insect box using dead insects found in your home. So you're familiar with this activity. You have discussed this in grade 8 also. There also we discussed the preparation of insect boxes. What do we do there? So you need to collect insects. So with the help of your friends, your teachers, your colleagues or even your elders, family members, you can collect insects. It is better if the insect is dead. But if it is not, for the purpose of studies, you can take one insect, you can keep it inside a bottle until it dies. But it's preferable to collect insects that are already dead. And there are different ways of preserving them. Because the exoskeleton will remain, but inside the body you should make sure that it does not decompose. So there are different ways to preserve the insect. Once you do that, what you need to do is you need to get a box. Somewhat a rectangular box. It shouldn't be too deep. It has to have a certain height so that inside you can have a layer of either cushion or regiform to which you can pin the insects. So when you have a box like that, say a box like this, it has to be somewhat tall. Inside you will have a layer of, as I said, a cushion or preferably regiform, styrofoam. Over that you can have a nice cloth, piece of white cloth, a satin cloth or a very light colored cloth so that it looks neat and nice. And onto this only we will be pinning the insects. So here you can have different areas where you pin your preserved insects. So when you pin them, you can use head pins. You have to spread out the wings. After you pin it and make the insect box, you should be able to identify the insect as you see it. So first step, collect insects, then make sure you preserve them, then you make the insect box and to that you pin the insects. Is that all? No. You need to identify the insects and you have to make a label. So there should be a label. To do that, you can number the insects and you can paste another list of the insects on the lid of this box. Otherwise, if you have enough space, you can write the names under the insect itself. Either way is fine. But once you make it, you should be able to gather information easily from this insect box collection. So that is a basic idea that I have given to you all to make the insect box. But you can prepare an insect box using dead insects found in your home. You can use your innovative skills to come up with more better ideas of making it. That is an assignment that you all need to do. Since I have discussed this in the smaller grade in detail, I am not going to go into more detail here. With that, I will move on to the next slide. So here we look at the last phylum under invertebrates. You can remember the 5 phyla, students. First one is Cnidaria or Coelenterata, then Annelida, mollusca, Arthropoda, and now Echinodermata or Echinodermata. It is a phylum that shows phylogenetic or evolutionary relationship to phylum Chordata. You all know the meaning of evolutionary relationships. Evolutionary process, one organism evolves from the other existing organism. So there will be some characteristics which are similar. So what is phylum Chordata? Phylum Chordata are the animals that possess a cord called the notochord. Notochord. Now, this notochord is present in any stage of the life cycle of this organism. Then we call them as phylum Chordata. Now, we also belong to phylum Chordata, man, but in us, the notochord is present in our embryonic stage. Thereafter, when the embryo develops into a fetus, a child, baby, the notochord is incorporated with our vertebral column. So, these chordata are the organisms that have a notochord in at least one of the stages of their life cycle. So, these chordates are related, or echinodermates are related to chordates phylogenetically. That is evolutionary relationship. That is something you have to remember, students. Then if we look at the examples, few examples are given to you: starfish, sea urchin, sea cucumber. So here starfish, sea urchin, sea cucumber. Then there is sea lily, then brittle star, these are all different types of echinodermate animals. So here you can see starfish. It looks like a star. You can see the structure, the 5 appendages. So kind of you can imagine the symmetry here. There is more than one axis that can be used as the axis of symmetry, but it is limited. Unlike the radial symmetry where you can use any axis, here we can use this axis, along this. So because there are 5 appendages, there are 5 axes of symmetry. So we call that as pentaradial symmetry. So the echinodermates, they have pentaradial symmetrical body. The same goes for sea urchin, sea cucumber, all the animals under phylum Echinodermata. And also, you can see these small structures here. Those are known as tube feet. We will discuss that. They are used in locomotion also. So, those are the parts of a starfish. Then there is the sea urchin here, like a porcupine, something like that. But from the name you all know, all these they live in the sea. Sea urchin. You can see these spike-like structures as well. Then there is the sea cucumber. So from the name, it's like a cucumber, long elongated structure, but that also has pentaradial symmetry. Sea cucumber. Then there is sea lily. Lily, you know, is a flower. So this looks like the lily flower, but inside the sea, it's an animal. So sea lily. Then brittle star, again similar to starfish. Only thing is the appendages are more longer. It's very brittle in nature. You know the meaning of brittle. It can break off easily. So brittle star. It looks like it's breaking off easily. So starfish, sea urchin, sea cucumber, sea lily and brittle star are some examples of Echinodermata animals. Now that you all know the examples, let us watch a video and try to understand the features of these animals. Okay, students. So you have observed the features of these animals in their natural habitat itself. So you have a better understanding now. with that understanding, we will discuss the features of Echinodermates. Features of Echinodermata. Under that examples, starfish, brittle star, sea urchin, sea cucumber, sea lily. Those are the animals belonging to phylum Echinodermata. Then the phylogeny, that is a special feature. Their phylogenetical relationship to phylum Chordata. So I explain what phylum Chordata is. They possess a notochord in at least some part of their life cycle. So phylum Chordata. Phylogenetic or evolutionary relationship to phylum Chordata. Then if you look at the habitat, all of them are marine. Very important. All are marine. Earlier we saw the different animals, they live in different habitats. But here, all the Echinodermata animals, they live in marine environment. Then if we take the body layers and the coelom, obvious, they are triploblastic. They do have a coelom. So you can remember students starting from Annelida. They are triploblastic, 3 germinal layers, and the body cavity is known as coelom, and the body is separated into 5 radial arms. So I showed you all with the starfish, 5 radial arms. And there is no heart, no brain, no eyes. Heart, brain and eyes are absent. So they don't have a heart, brain or eyes. And the body covering, they have a sharp spiny body covering. Outer covering of the body, it's not called a skeleton, not an exoskeleton. It is a sharp spiny body covering. And if you look at the body shape, now starfish, brittle star, I told you all they are star shaped. Then you saw the sea cucumber, even sea lily. Or we can take the sea cucumber, it is a cylindrical shape. Sea lily is flower-like. So it can be star-shaped, cylindrical or flower-like. Then if we consider this is a special feature that we discuss only with Echinodermata, water vascular system. The body possesses a highly distributed water vascular system. That is a special feature for Echinodermata. Water vascular system present inside the body of Echinodermata. Then there is this tube feet, another feature. Tube feet present for locomotion as well as respiration. I told you all when I showed you all the starfish, the small structures at the bottom, those are the tube feet. Tube feet present for locomotion and respiration. And then the symmetry. So again, a special feature. So far we have come across radial symmetry and bilateral symmetry. But here it is pentaradial symmetry. 5 different axes that can be used to divide the body into 2 equal halves. Pentaradial symmetry. And finally, we have reproduction. They again show sexual dimorphism. Like arthropods, Echinodermata also shows sexual dimorphism. What does that mean? There is the male organism and the female organism, and you can identify the male and female organisms separately. Sexual dimorphism and carry out sexual reproduction. So that again is a feature of Echinodermata. We will quickly go through the features again. Example, starfish, brittle star, sea urchin, sea cucumber, sea lily. Then for phylogeny, they are phylogenetically related to phylum Chordata. Habitat, all are marine. Very important, they are all marine organisms. Body layers, triploblastic, they have a coelom and the body is separated into 5 radial arms. That is why pentaradial symmetry. No heart, brain or eyes. And their body covering is a sharp spiny body covering. And the body shape, star shape, cylindrical shape and flower-like shape. Water vascular system is present. Then there is tube feet that is also present, that is there for locomotion and respiration, and the symmetry is pentaradial symmetry, and also they show sexual dimorphism and carry out sexual reproduction. So those are the features of Echinodermata that you need to remember, students. With that, I will move on to the next slide where I will show you the body structure of an echinodermate animal. So here you can see, students, cross section of an echinodermate, but from the shape you all can identify it is a starfish. So you can see the radial arms there. So these are the radial arms. You can see radial arms. So there will be 5 radial arms. Then you can see inside the radial arm where there is the sharp spiny outer covering for the body. If you remove that, this is the water vascular system. Water goes in and it gets distributed throughout the 5 arms, the pentaradial arms. So this is the water vascular system. Vascular system. Then we have the tube feet structure. This is the tube feet. This is how you have the tube feet. They are used for locomotion and respiration. These are the radial arms. I have already marked it here. And these tube feet are found in these radial arms. So these are the parts of the cross-section of an echinodermata that you need to identify. The water vascular system, the radial arms, and the tube feet present there. So with that, students, I am sure you all have a very good understanding about the organisms or animals that belong to echinodermata. So in this chapter, we discuss the vertebrates under kingdom Animalia. Vertebrates, animals without a vertebral column. Under that, we looked at the examples and features of Cnidarians or coelenterate, then annelids, mollusc, arthropod, and echinodermates. Those belong to the 5 phylums: phylum Cnidaria or coelenterata, phylum Annelida, phylum Mollusca, phylum Arthropoda, and phylum Echinodermata. So in the next chapter, I will discuss the groups of animals that belong to the group vertebrates.